So I said to him, "You're never going to be even as good as me, so you might as well just accept that you're going to go to your grave dissatisfied." Now that's an audacious statement from a teacher, but I'll explain. And if you're new here, my name is Chase Sanborn, and I'm a jazz trumpet player based in Toronto. I stole the title for this video from a 2008 documentary about trumpeter Jack Sheldon. It's a concise description of every musician's ambition. Having taught thousands of university jazz students, and now when my teaching roster consists mainly of older adults, I've noted and remarked on the difference between trying to get good at something when you're young versus when you're older. With nearly a half-century of experience as a professional musician, I would never say to a younger student that they will never be as good as me. When your whole adult life is in front of you, what you accomplish is really only limited by your determination. Besides, I hear people in their 20s, and a few of them even in their teens, who play better than I ever have or will, so I'm under no illusions. A young student who's preparing for a career in music faces the challenge not only of getting good, but also worrying about how they're going to parlay their ability into a viable career. An aspiring jazz musician faces unrelenting advice to give it up as an impossible dream. An older student, someone who's retired or immersed in another career, doesn't face that same kind of external pressure. But there's often internal pressure to reach what for some will be an illusory goal. A retired person usually has more time available during the day, but they're likely working with a mind or a body that's slower to learn new things or master new physical skills. Someone who's in midlife or mid-career has the advantage of being younger, but often struggles with finding the time to devote to practice and study. And I've got more than one student who feels frustrated when work intrudes on music time. When I ask an adult student what their goals are, I often hear something like, "I'd just like to be able to play something that I'm happy with," or "I'd just like to be able to play a nice-sounding jazz solo." These seem like reasonable goals, and they are, except for that nagging voice that says, "I'm not there yet." The question is, are you ever going to get there, and how will you know it if you do? Now, years ago, I fancied myself as somewhat of an audiophile. On one level, that's a great hobby for a musician, because a really good audio system enhances the pleasure that we derive from listening to music. On the other hand, high-end audio is at odds with a jazz musician's pocketbook. Once you reach a certain level, the price tags become astronomical and logarithmic. If your $150 interconnect cable isn't delivering what you hope for, you probably need to spend $1,500 to hear a difference. And once you spend that money, you'll be convinced that you do. So I was a poor man's audiophile, buying used components and reading all the magazines. One benefit was that when I was on the road, I'd go to visit local hi-fi shops. And because I knew a bit about the gear, even though I couldn't afford it, and once the sales staff found out that I was a musician, well, they were eager to sit me down with a coffee and get my thoughts on their prized systems. Now, this may seem like a tangent, but there's a tie-in. Audiophiles are forever trying to eke out small improvements. At some point, the returns are diminishing. One thing that I found is that the more revealing the system, the more dissatisfied I became with the recording quality of many of my records. I mean, how many times can you listen to jazz at the pawn shop? And audiophiles will know what I'm talking about. The endless pursuit for improvement was summed up in a comment that I once read in one of the magazines. I dreamt that I put together the perfect hi-fi system, and I still wasn't happy. For the adult jazz musician, there's a feeling that if I reach a certain level, then I'll be happy. The problem is that wherever you set that goalpost, and even if you get close to it, by that time you're seeing others further ahead. It's the old thing of the more you learn, the more you realize how much you still don't know. And for some, it's a fine line between being encouraged by your progress versus being discouraged by your perceived lack of progress. So if I say to an adult student that you're not going to be as good as me, it's not to puff myself up. It's certainly not meant to disparage or discourage. It's just a matter of time. A few years ago, I made a video in which I tried to calculate how many hours I had spent in the practice room up to that point. It was a rough estimate at best, but my calculations suggested that I hit the 10,000-hour mark around age 25. And according to Malcolm Gladwell, that's the number of hours it takes to become an expert at something. That sort of made sense because by that time, I was supporting myself by playing the trumpet. Not in any grand style, to be sure, but still. And if somebody's paying you to do something, well, they'd be right to expect that you're an expert at it. By the time I made those calculations, though, I had amassed several decades of professional playing experience, along with all the practice hours that I put in during that time, which I calculated to have grown to over 30,000. I thought then, and I think now, that calculating my hourly wage is probably not going to be a happy realization. A student who's in the latter years of their life is just not going to put in that amount of time. And even if they did, it's probably going to take them even longer because of the realities of age. So if success is defined in those terms, some ill-defined definition of what it means to be good, well, the process may turn out to be more frustrating than it is fun. Fortunately, you don't have to practice for 50 years in order to enjoy playing music. And you don't even have to reach a certain level before another person may enjoy listening to you. For one thing, the audiences that are likely to come hear a jazz group that's comprised of older or amateur musicians are less demanding than the general jazz audience, to the extent that there is one of those. While you may have your own barometer for whether you succeed or fail or somewhere in between, to them, you've succeeded just by being willing to step out on that tightrope. This is another critical difference between older and younger students. If you were a kid learning to play trumpet in a school band, you weren't comparing yourself to Clifford Brown or Chet Baker or even Chase Sanborn. Your only competition was the kid sitting next to you, and even that wasn't as big a deal since you're all acquiring multiple skills at the same time. An adult comes at this with greater expectations, coupled with a sense of impatience and urgency, knowing that time is fleeting. They may be stymied by a slow rate of progress. It's hard to maintain the mindset that you're only in competition with yourself, but it's crucial to appreciate each step along the way. I'll cite my student Scott as an example. Scott is a semi-retired professional in the legal field, and he's still keeping his hand in, but he's lightening his workload to allow more time for other interests, which in this case is relearning how to play the trumpet. By his own description, Scott tends to latch onto something and then give it his all for 3 to 4 years before moving on to something else. And he's been true to his word. For the 9 months that he's been studying with me, he practices 1.5 to 2 hours a day without fail. He keeps copious notes about what we do and also information that he gleans from other sources, which includes a lot of time spent listening to music. For the final lesson this year, Scott put together a list of all the things that he's learned in the last 9 months. When we went over that list together, he said, "This is a lot of progress for me. I assume for you, at this point, the gains are probably smaller." Now, he's absolutely right. The better you get, the more subtle the improvements become. My practice sessions are more about maintenance and refinement than making any great strides. When you're new to something, the potential advances are huge in relation. Although I will say that with an instrument like the trumpet, the progress is often 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. It's not an easy slog for someone who expects a steady rate of climb. Scott also laid out a goal for himself. Each year, he puts together a CD containing Christmas music from a specific decade. For next year, he hopes to record a song himself. Now, between the list and the goal, this is a great example of looking forward while remembering to look back to remind yourself of how far you've come. For Scott, it may be a finite timeline if his music follows the path of other interests. He may reach the point where he says, "Okay, time for something else." One of the benefits of later life is that we have the opportunity and the freedom to explore things without worrying where they will eventually lead, as long as we can avoid putting that pressure on ourselves. It sounds trite to say that it's a journey, not a destination, but for musical study, that's apt. Now, this is a logical point for me to interject and say that if you are on the journey to learning to play the trumpet or improvise jazz, you'll find a lot of helpful information in my books. In a book, I can go into much greater detail than I can in a 10-minute video or even a series of them, and book sales help support the channel. If you want instruction that is specific to you and you want to reach your goals faster, I offer one-on-one lessons on Zoom, and you can find out more at chasesanborn.com. If you are a jazz student of any age who feels discouraged or dissatisfied, here's something to think about. An audience doesn't care what we know or what we're able to do. They care about what it feels like when they listen to us. For a musician at any level, the most important thing is to put heart and soul into every note we play. If you do that, they'll feel it. They'll come up and they'll tell you how much they like your playing. And at that point, the challenge for you is to smile and say thanks, even if your inner voice is yelling, "I suck." If you don't think this video sucks, or even if you do, please take a second to click the like button and subscribe for more thoughts from the mind of a jazz trumpet player, like those videos you see right up there.